Good morning, friends. Welcome to our second online worship service, where we gather in spirit, if not in body. I really wish that I could be with you this morning in person, and yet I'm grateful that we're doing our part to help our communities stay safe. I'm so glad that we're able to gather virtually, if not physically. If you're participating at home, I invite you to take a selfie and pop it in the comments below on Facebook. Bonus points if it contains pajamas or breakfast cereal, because that's the way to do church these days. You can also post your joys and sorrows that you're carrying with you today in the comments below. I'll be here this morning reading and responding to them. So this week was supposed to be a big worship kickoff for our stewardship campaign, which we now expect will take a little longer than we initially planned. Pledges of financial support, though, from our families, our friends, our members, are still the primary way that we fund the good work of this community. So if you'd like to give toward this morning's offering or make an annual pledge to the church, you can do that via links in the comments below as well. We are so grateful for your generosity now more than ever. So let's begin by lighting a chalice together this morning. So if you want to pause here to run and grab a candle to light at home, please do. I'm lighting this little chalice, a gift that a seminary classmate brought home for me from Palestine. But you make do with whatever you've got. You got birthday candles, that's fine. A big giant scented candle in the middle of your table, perfect. Electronic Christmas candle that's inexplicably still on your windowsill the fourth Sunday of March. No judgment here. We're all just kindling the light within, right? So light your flames and let us begin. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. Now let's join in singing and maybe even a little dancing at home and together.
Let it be a dance we do. This dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance, let a dancing song be heard. Play the music, say the words, and fill the air with sailing birds. Let it be a dance, let it be a dance, let it be a dance. Learn to follow, learn to lead. Feel the rhythm, feel the need. To reap the harvest, plant the seed. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you. Through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Turn and spin. Let your body learn to bend. And like a willow with the wind. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. A child is born, the old must die. A time for joy, a time to cry. Take it as it passes by. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you. Through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Morning star comes out at night. Without the dark there is no light. If nothing's wrong then nothing's right. Let it be a dance, let it be a dance, let it be a dance. Let the sunshine, let it rain. Share the laughter, bear the pain. And round we go again. Let it be a dance.
And now it's time for a story. Today's story is a very old story that comes to us from the tradition of Taoism. And it's a story about a man named Feng Zhuan. So Feng Zhuan went to work for the Duke, a Duke who lived in a big palace with lots of fancy things and lots of servants who worked for him. And one of them was Feng Zhuan. Now, he didn't have very many particular skills, but he was a good person. So one day, the Duke sent Feng Zhuan out to a remote village to collect loan repayments on behalf of the Duke. He had loaned these villagers some money, he charged them interest, and now it was time for him to collect back what he had loaned and then some extra. And so he sent Feng Zhuan to do this job. And he said, after you've collected that money for me, purchase something of worth. Notice in my palace what I don't have, but that I do need, and purchase something for me. That's your task. So Feng Zhuan went to the village, and the people were poor there, but they paid their debts. It took him a long time to collect all the money. And then he thought about what it was that the Duke did not have, but did need, what he could purchase that would be worth something to this Duke. And Feng Zhuan decided to give that money back to the villagers. So he went back to each house where he collected debt and he redistributed the money, gave it right back to them. And so when he got back to the palace and told the Duke what he had done, the Duke was very unhappy. He said, "You might as well have done nothing." And Feng Zhuan said, "Maybe, but by doing nothing, I purchased yi, meaning righteousness, and righteousness meaning doing the right thing." And they left it at that. And so years later, the Duke was in his palace when enemies attacked. They attacked the palace and the Duke's life was in danger. So the Duke fled. He left the palace and Feng Zhuan led him to this remote village where once he had gone to collect a debt. And the villagers remembered the Duke's righteousness, the fact that he had returned everything that was owed to him all those years ago. And they hid him. They created a safe and secure place for him among them. And he stayed there for years. And he recognized that what Feng Zhuan had bought was indeed righteousness. And it was something that he did need and did not have. Now is the time in our service for centering, for meditation, followed by some shared silence. So I invite you now, get comfortable wherever you're sitting. Let your feet find the floor beneath you. Take a deep breath in and let it out. Spirit of life, teach me to surrender. Show me how to let go. Teach me to surrender from the battles I never wanted to fight, from the wars I don't really believe in. Let me let go of the prejudices I've learned, the deeply buried hates and heartaches and hardness that I defend against change in spite of myself. Teach me to unmake the battlements I've built in my heart, to set down the swords I use to shelter the me I don't want to be anyway. Show me how to take apart the armor I wear to keep those painful parts hidden, even from myself. Teach me to surrender and to dismantle the arsenal in myself, to melt down the defenses, shield my hurt and my hurtfulness, and to form them into plowshares, into the tools of growth. Let me let go. Once more, take a breath in and let it out. I used to be part of a spiritual book club, and we came around to the topic of non-attachment pretty often. So one of our members was a philosophy professor in his late 60s, and he was just about exactly how you'd expect a gray-haired philosophy professor to be. So I assure you, the stereotype you're picturing, that's him. Exceedingly clever and thoughtfully measured in everything he shared with our group, a classic overthinker trying not to overthink. So we circled around once again to Buddhist philosophy one evening, and he talked through, as much for his own detanglement of the concepts as for ours, the idea of non-attachment, of non-doing, of non-being. And he arrived, eventually, at a moment of realization and supreme clarity about these principles and exclaimed, "Yes, that's enlightenment. I got it." And then instantly sank into his chair and laughed at himself and said, "Never mind, it's gone. The second I grasped the idea, I lost it." And this is the paradox of non-doing, isn't it? The moment you try to do nothing, think nothing, be nothing, you're, of course, doing something. The thing you're doing is trying to do nothing, not doing nothing. So I've long been fascinated with the Taoist concept of Wu Wei, which is our topic this morning. Wu Wei means, in ancient Chinese, non-doing, or more simply, doing nothing. Rather than get lost in the paradox of that, we might try thinking about it as effortless action. Alan Watts, in The Watercourse Way, calls it not forcing. A beloved Tai Chi teacher of mine explained it to me using a block of wood as an example. If you cut the wood against the grain, he said, you'll struggle and toil. But when you cut with the grain along the natural flow of the wood, the axe moves through it like a boat with the current. So Taoism offers us this lovely invitation to not force. It's not an invitation to laziness or inaction per se, but to an awareness of the life and energy beyond our own intentions. We want the wood in smaller pieces, but the wood has a flow of energy through it so that, in a way, the wood wants to be split in a certain direction. Paddling without an awareness of the energy of currents is a struggle, but floating with the current, in connection to our surroundings, is peace. We might think of this as an unself-consciousness, or a union between oneself and one's environment. If you've ever watched a child play, or a really great musician improvising, or a phenomenal soccer player run, dribble, and dodge, this might sound familiar to you. It's like what we sometimes call a flow state. When your conscious mind lets go, gives up control, your true nature becomes your guide. Or rather, your being part of a nature larger than your individual self becomes what guides you. To give you an example, there was an artistic style that rose up in China during the Tang Dynasty around the 7th century CE, out of an understanding of Wu Wei. Instead of trying to create a perfect rendering of nature, artists sought to encounter nature within themselves and surrender to its energy. The artist in this school of art was meant not to create an identical copy of their subjects, but to portray the qi, or the spirit of things, like lakes and rivers, mountains, plants, and animals, by feeling a part of this spirit themselves and letting it flow out of them. A historian wrote during this time period to describe a big party that had been thrown to witness the painter Zhang in action. He wrote, "Right in the middle of the room, he sat down with his legs spread out, took a deep breath, and his inspiration began to issue forth. Those present were startled as if lightning were shooting across the heavens or a whirlwind was sweeping into the sky. The ink seemed to be spitting from his flying brush. He clapped his hands with a cracking sound. Suddenly strange shapes were born. When he had finished, there stood pine trees, scaly and riven, crags steep and precipitous, clear water and turbulent clouds. He threw down his brush, got up, and looked around in every direction. It seemed as if the sky had cleared after a storm to reveal the true essence of 10,000 things. His art was not painting, but the very Tao itself." So I've been thinking a lot about Wu Wei as we practice social distancing, an act that feels a lot like a really radical non-doing for this extreme extrovert. Living without our normal distractions and tasks, for many of us without our typical work, has laid bare, for some, how frenetic our lives were before now. We might be beginning to see how forced all that action had really been, how much busyness had really been a ritual of swimming upstream for the sake of pride. We are now, more than ever, seeing the power of doing nothing, of staying in place. And more than just stillness, we're seeing the power of awareness of our being part of the stream itself. The Tao Te Ching encourages practitioners to be like a reed, swaying in the river as it flows past. If it stayed rigid, forceful against the nature of the water, it would break. By bending, by giving into the energy of the water, it not only survives, but becomes itself a part of the river, where all things, rather than facing each other down in rigidity, flow with the same force. In politics, activism, justice work, this has been called strategic passivity. We see it in Dr. Martin Luther King's strategy of nonviolent resistance. The strategy was to resist injustice, not by force or inflexible power, but by activists placing themselves in the line of oppressors' inflexible power, bending with each bow. Simply sitting at buses or at lunch counters, marching peacefully in the streets, consumer inaction in the form of a boycott. It is a strategy that wins by giving up the struggle for hard and unyielding power, by giving up the oppressor's lie that we exist alone outside of our environment. It compels in its very passivity the wielders of oppressive power and their bystanders to recognize themselves as interrelated with those they oppress, as part of the one river flowing. The intentional inaction of social isolation in a pandemic is similarly compelling. I think this idea of Wu Wei has been so useful to me during this time, not just because it gives meaning to the new, slower movements of our daily lives, but because pandemic opens our eyes to see, clearer than ever, the truth of our own vulnerability. And similarly, The very things that Wu Wei, a disciplined not forcing, calls us to give up are our delusions of control, our expectations of security, our imagined power to grasp at that for ourselves. I don't know about you, but I've seen all my tightly held expectations challenged in the last couple weeks. I have an expectation of long life in a body that moves easily through the world. I have an expectation of many more years with my partner, my friends, my children, my parents. I feel entitled to those things. This is the feeling behind the impulse to hoard and prep, stockpiling toilet paper, guarding precious face masks while healthcare workers use bandanas, sitting on a pile of $112 billion while workers in your very own company go hungry while in quarantine. And yet, of course, we have no claim on any of these things we hoard to secure our own personal safety. We have no claim on the lives of those we love, on our own lives. All of this, life itself, is gratuitous. And to grasp a feeling of security in my own expectations, it's like the professor grasping at enlightenment, gone the moment it's caught. The beauty of Wu Wei is that giving up the expectation of security, certainty, power, when we do that, we make room to be grateful for the gift of all life. We live in the acknowledgement of our interconnection, because this crisis is revealing all the ways that we have been living as if we were separate. My dad suggested to me when we were together a few weeks ago, just as the spread of COVID-19 throughout the US seemed inevitable, that we should just close schools for a month and use online learning. He was right. Closing schools would be necessary, but our generation's long, rigid insistence on the myth of individuality meant it could not be done without harm. The time for schools and businesses to be closed is now, but the time to issue laptops to students and teachers, to make Wi-Fi a publicly owned utility, to ensure paid leave for those children's parents and a wage that would have allowed them to fill their cupboards for a month, that time was ages ago. The time to live as if the water, the pebbles, the reeds, the fish, and actually all of us are part of the same river of life, that time was ages ago. And that time is right now. Suddenly, the microbes have exposed us, friends. We have never been pure individuals. We have been a network of life all along. A single spirit of life flows through all of us, and Wu Wei is the surrender to it. This particular kind of giving up, I'm realizing, is at the heart of justice. As this crisis erodes our resistance to the truth that we are part of the same river, justice looks like bending as the reeds on the river must. Grappling for personal security, personal safety, in a time of pandemic is the kind of rigidity that will snap us in two. Personal safety, individual thriving, it is now made painfully clear, was always a lie. I breathe in the same air that you breathe out. We are, as we always have been, in this together. May it be so.
The river is a healer. The river is a sage. The river knows no end, and the river feels no age. The river is a leader every single day. It's living in the moment, and it always finds a way. Water heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. The river calls me over, it's calling out my name. the day and in the night I hear that river all the same. It's calling me over, calling out my pain. Oh, a river gathers tears just like a river gathers rain. Water heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down, down to the water, by the water I feel whole. The river is a traveler, always on the go, and a river never worries if it's fast or if it's slow. River, take me to where I need to go. Oh, and I will just relax and let the river flow. Water heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down, down to the water, by the water I feel whole. Water heal my body, water heal my soul. When I go down, down to the water, by the water I feel whole. When I go down, down to the water, by the water I feel whole.
I want to end our time together with these words from the poet Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world, and I'm free. Let us now extinguish our chalice together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And friends, I invite you to take in this last hymn together, sing together, even though we are separate, and we'll see each other again soon. May it be so.
Till by